call the meeting to order. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, nation under God, liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Lim? Here. Mrs. Spirito? Here. Ms. Laird? Here. Ms. Lewis? Here. Mr. Price?
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our regular meeting from October 24th, 2022, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Laird. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bloom. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Laird? Yes. Mrs. Bloom? Yes. Mrs. Spirito? Yes. Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes, motion's approved. Next up, legislative report.
So the legislative report this evening, there was going to be a presentation in lieu of my personal report. Our guests aren't here yet.
Correct.
What's being presented tonight, folks, is the backpack legislative piece that has to do with school choice. A few meetings back, we had a law firm do a presentation for us that is taking up legal action against the legislative piece, as they believe its constitutionality is in question. So we were going to have those who support the legislative present their side of things for everybody to hear this evening. I guess I have two recommendations. One is that our guests just happen to be running a little bit late, that when they do arrive, we make room on the agenda for them at that time. And that if they don't, I'd like to recommend that we hold our decision on what our participation will be in the lawsuit until we do hear from the other perspective and point of view. I know I need that information.
Yep. Sounds good to me.
I would agree.
Okay. So we'll do that. So if they make it in tonight, if they're just held up or whatever, we'll just kind of fit them in where we're at. We can finish one portion and move on so we can get right into their presentations.
Sounds good.
Okay. No walk-on items tonight?
No, sir.
Okay. For the community, this is the first hearing for the public. If anyone would like to address the board, you can come up to the podium. We just ask you state your name and address for record purposes, and feel free to come on up.
I wasn't planning on saying anything. My name is Kay Mooney Cox. Address 2327 County Road 241. That's in Riley Township. Is that it? I sent a detailed email to all of you after the last meeting, so I hope you read it, and that was in opposition to the release time Christian education program. So I wasn't going to say anything, but I just saw that Gary Click is going to come to support HB 490, which is the backpack bill. And I just want to state my opinion that taxes are for public schools, only for public schools. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the board? Okay. Go ahead and move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay. Didn't have a lot tonight, so we're making time for our guests, and hopefully we'll still have them. I was able to find Mr. Click's, or Representative Click's phone number, so I texted him. Haven't heard anything back yet, so
okay.
Hope things all is well. In your board packet tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you saw, or I put in a food pantry brochure. I'm not going to read it all now, and I just want to draw your attention to that. Actually, it was an event that we saw at in Columbus for one of the sessions. I think Mr. Price went to one. I don't know if Sarah, if you went to that one or not, but there was one that was about food pantries and how we help our students in need, maybe have some food issues at home. So I didn't know everything that we do. So we do a lot, and not I should know that, right? But we do a lot for our families. So we put this together for you, and I'll let you read that on your own. I might bring this up later and talk about it, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that. Also, quickly, if you didn't get to see the musical a month ago, it was amazing. well received in our beautiful new space. About 40 kids involved. We had over 500 people there on a Sunday afternoon matinee. Just a fabulous turnout and response from the community, and especially of our talented students. Just wanted to do a public cry out to them. Also, you notice in the donations, there's some pizzas for the fall musical cast and crew. I'd be lying if I didn't say I got a little bit of that pizza for my participation in the musical, but it was just a great time. Congratulations to Scott Havas and Julia Zucker, who is our new choir teacher, for kind of just ramping up our arts department there and using our space. We sent today a survey from the district leadership team. So I think Sarah was at that meeting. We sort of devised a survey just to see how are we doing. Now we feel like, I keep throwing that normal word around, right? That we're kind of back a little bit. We really are just, I think, a frank ask of the staff. How are we doing? And how do you feel about your support here? Are you comfortable here? Do you feel appreciated here? So you may have seen that in your FCSD. Take a look at it if you get a chance. So we're asking the whole staff to get back to us over the next week and just let us know how we're doing. So we'll bring those results back to the district leadership team, to the board, and maybe talk about next steps and just what we can do. So trying to take an honest look at how we're doing. I think I see someone in the audience who might be Troy McIntosh. You didn't deny it, so he must be here. Welcome, Troy. It's good to see you. I'm John Detweiler, superintendent, and we just kind of got started, and we're going to get you in here in just a moment, if that's all right, Mr.
Yep,
Price. Okay. Last thing on my just regular update, the draft school calendar. State law says that we have to kind of give a 30-day notice for potentially what the school calendar is going to be for next year. So you have those two. The staff did get surveyed on that, and they were about 60-40 for the longer spring break. I know you find it hard to believe, right? 60-40 for the longer spring break, which is calendar A. So I'm just going to let you look at that for a month. We need to make it public for a month, and then we'll talk about that again, probably in January, because we only have the one meeting in December. So just want to have you take a look at that. So I will turn it back to you, Mr. Price, if you want to maybe introduce this is Troy McIntosh, unless you want me to.
Sure. Yeah, you can.
I'm on a roll. Okay. Mr. McIntosh, thank you for coming. We're going to have you speak at the podium, if we could have you there. These microphones don't do anything for us here, but they allow us to stream to watchers at home and also record this for all of time.
Sure.
All of time, infinitely, right? So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Troy, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I know you're from the Ohio Christian Education Association. Did I get that right?
Network.
Network.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I know that you have worked with Gary Click Representative Click on a few things.
Yeah.
And are here to sort of talk about the backpack bill and kind of its implications for us and you and kind of that side of the argument. So
Yeah.
I give you the floor. Troy McIntosh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, members of the board, for the invitation to come tonight. And thank you for the work that you do on behalf of the kids in the Fremont School District. That is very important. I come as an educator myself. I was 27 years in education and 24 of those in administration. And for the last year and a half, I have served as executive director of the Ohio Christian Education Network, which is a network of about 140 schools across the state. And so we work on public policy, similar to some of the organizations that I'm sure Fremont Schools is a member of. And there are really two things I want to take tonight, and certainly open for any questions that you might have, because I want to be a resource for you as you make important decisions regarding your school district. Number one, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of backpack bill. But first, I also want to address the current lawsuit that is pending in Franklin County right now over the constitutionality of the Ed Choice program. I believe Mr. Bill Phillis was here recently to address your board and inviting you to participate in that lawsuit. And I would like tonight to provide some counter arguments to what I suspect Mr. Phillis provided as reasons not to join the lawsuit. So let me start with that. And the constitutionality of the Ed Choice system hinges on a phrase in the Ohio Constitution This isn't a federal constitutional issue. That issue has been settled repeatedly in numerous cases before the Supreme Court. But there's a phrase in the Ohio Constitution that requires the state to provide a thorough and efficient system of education for Ohio students. That's why public schools like Fremont exist, or at least part of the reason. It's the authorized constitutional reason why they exist. Mr. Phyllis would make the argument that that precludes the state from providing any funding for anything other than going directly to a public school system in Ohio. However, I believe the correct legal argument would be that as long as the state sufficiently provides for a thorough and efficient system of common schools, nothing in the Constitution precludes the state from also funding other means of education. And that would include a scholarship to parents, like occurs in EdChoice, so that they can choose what might they believe to be the best school option for their children. As a matter of fact, this very issue was taken before the West Virginia Supreme Court in the last several months. The West Virginia Constitution has an almost identical phrase in its Constitution about the state providing a thorough and efficient system of common schools. West Virginia passed about 12 months ago a Hope Scholarship Bill, which would provide a scholarship to every student in the state. Well, almost every student. It was about 95% of students would have been eligible for that scholarship this year. It was challenged in court, and so it was stayed while that was being worked its way up West Virginia courts. And about 2 months ago, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled on this very issue. Does the constitutional requirement that a state provide a thorough and efficient system of common schools preclude a state from providing a choice scholarship program? And the West Virginia Supreme Court said, no, it does not preclude the state from doing that very thing. And so we have precedent, and I understand that West Virginia decisions are not binding on Ohio, but the legal argument, the legal reasonings are the same. Okay? There is nothing in the Ohio Constitution that prevents the state from democratically passing a program that allows for parents to accept a scholarship to take their child to a schooling option that they believe is the best option for their children. This is also backed by a significant amount of polling that has happened not just in Ohio, but across the country, in which parents are asked, should parents be allowed to take the state allocation of money with them to the schooling option of their choice? The repeated questions are exactly in line with how the EdChoice system and a potential backpack system would work. And a supermajority of both parties affirmatively answered that question. 66% of Democrats, 83% of Republicans say yes, a parent should have the right to take the funding allocated for their child, at least in the cases that we're talking about, the state funding, and take them to the schooling option that the parent believes is the best option for their child. This is overwhelmingly popular with parents. And I have to believe, while I don't have polling data specific to Fremont School District, I have to believe that it's similar numbers here because we don't see great differences geographically in polling in other parts of the state. So the question becomes, is joining a suit that would use public money, because in order to join the lawsuit, you are funding the Vouchers Hurt Ohio coalition, is using public money to join that lawsuit a valid use of public money against a democratically enacted program that has very, very firm constitutional grounds? I would argue that it does not. It is not. As a matter of fact, I think it raises the very question, do public schools even have standing as a state actor to bring a lawsuit against a state program? I know that will be one of the arguments that the court considers when they hear the case is, does this coalition even have standing to sue the state on this issue? I just came from a school. It's one of the reasons I apologize for being just a few minutes late. I came from a school on the west side of Columbus that is a new school this year, and it has 33 students in kindergarten, first, and second grade. Of those 33 students, 32 of them attend on an Ed Choice scholarship. So their entire tuition amount is paid for with the state scholarship. And listening, I wish you could listen to the parents who attend that school because they will talk about the transformational difference that that school has made in the life of their child. I'm not here to tell you that would be the case for every child, because there are certainly families across the state. As a matter of fact, I would presume the majority of families would be satisfied with the public school that they attend and would continue to attend there. But at least for these 33 students and for over 50,000 students across the state who have chosen to take an Ed Choice scholarship and attend a school that their family believes is a better fit for their student, it's a transformational opportunity for those kids. Their academic performance has improved. Their school attitude has improved. Their relationships with their peers and their teachers has improved as a result of them being able to take an Ed Choice scholarship and attend another school. Now, I know this may not be true. I know it's not true in Fremont, but the schools that those children would have otherwise been assigned to have less than a 5% passage rate on the third grade reading assessment. Those are the types of schools that those kids are bound to simply because of the zip code that they live in. They don't have the option of coming to Fremont. They were bound, and they don't even have the option of taking open enrollment because all the suburban districts around Columbus have declined open enrollment and formed a wall around the district for there's no place for those kids to go unless they have an Ed Choice scholarship. Like I said, over 50,000 students in Ohio have taken that option. And although I don't believe the lawsuit will be successful, if it were to be successful, all 50-some thousand of those students would lose their scholarship and have to leave the school that they have chosen and love to be at. So I have to ask the question, is this a valid use of public money to take action against a democratically elected program that certainly at least some families in your district wish to take advantage of? I know Fremont doesn't have a lot of students who take advantage of the program. As a matter of fact, the Ohio Department of Education website was down today, so I couldn't pull up the report, so I don't have the exact number. You may have that number anyway, but I believe it's less than 100 students who are currently using that. And so what that tells me is most families are satisfied with the education that they're receiving at Fremont, and that is fantastic. We want thriving and flourishing public schools in Ohio as much as anybody because we love and care for those kids as much as kids who attend our network schools. Okay, but the research has shown repeatedly that when families are given a choice to attend a school and they are given funding to take to a private school or another schooling option, the performance of the public school actually improves. 27 studies have looked at this very issue. What impact do choice programs like Ed Choice have on the academic performance of the public school students who choose to remain in their public schools? Of those 27 studies, 25 of them found that the academic performance actually improved for those students who stayed. That's the power of market forces being brought to an educational sector. And that's what we believe is missing right now. I know one of the big concerns is going to be overfunding, right? And that's a legitimate concern. You have a fiduciary responsibility as board members to consider that. What I'm sure Mr. Phillips didn't tell you, however, is that while there are fixed costs associated, and you guys know this, you look at your budget all the time. there are fixed costs associated with your school, running your schools, that stay the same whether or not those 80 or 90 students take an Ed Choice scholarship and leave, right? You have buildings to run, you have utilities to pay for, you may even have some faculty. Faculty is certainly not a fixed cost in the long term. Those can be adjusted. But what I'm sure he didn't tell you, because it never comes up by the anti-Ed Choice lobby, is that you also have fixed revenue. And what I mean by that is that when those 80 students take an Ed Choice scholarship and they live in Fremont School District and they go to another place, you do not receive the state allocation for those students, but you are fully funded for all the students who remain. So if you are a 1,000 student district, 80 students leave, you get fully funded for the 920 students who attend your school district by the state. But you also receive 100% of the local property tax that was assigned to those students who leave, even though they left. So local funding remains as if there were still 1,000 students attending your district. The state money continues to fully fund you for every student who chooses to attend here. So actually, your per pupil revenue will almost certainly increase as a result. Gross revenue may drop because you're educating 80 fewer students, but your per pupil revenue actually increases. And we believe that's one of the reasons why performance will increase after choice is introduced into the marketplace for public school students. There are other issues, I believe, that speak into why that's the case, but that's certainly a significant one. So I get what I would appeal to you anyway is to resist joining this lawsuit. There's no reason for free. It's not going to advance the lawsuit in any way. You really have to ask yourself, is this a valid use of public funds to chase after a lawsuit against a democratically elected, enacted program that will almost certainly be held constitutional anyway? Now, about the backpack bill, very quickly. The backpack bill essentially takes the Ed Choice program and expands it to every student in the state. We believe this is good public policy, whether a student chooses to take a backpack scholarship or not. And we fully understand and appreciate that most students will not. Most students in Fremont will continue to choose to attend Fremont City Schools because they're satisfied here. This is where they live. They want to be part of this community. They had a good experience here. You have quality teachers who do good work every day. They've had a good experience. But everybody knows there is no school system in the country where every student is a great fit for a particular school system. I worked at schools for 27 years. I loved that school. I thought it was a fantastic school. There were kids for which the school I worked at wasn't a great fit. The difference was I was a private school administrator. Those parents could leave anytime they wanted and take their money with them. That's not the case for public school students, at least most public school students who can't afford to pay for private school tuition on their own. They're largely locked in to where they live by zip code, or if they have the opportunity to open enroll at a nearby district, they may have one or two other options. Our argument is that students are best served by giving mom and dad the authority and empowerment to make that decision for themselves, to take the state money that's allocated to them and find the best schooling option. Currently, that bill is House Bill 290. That bill sits in the House Finance Committee. And we are not expecting any action on the House version of the bill for the rest of this General Assembly that goes through December. We are expecting a Senate version to be introduced in the near future. And we expect some hearings on that, but certainly nothing that will happen before the end of this General Assembly in December. There is the possibility, a very strong possibility, that come January when the new General Assembly is seated, that action will be taken on that, including support from Representative Click and some others from this area. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you for listening. But yeah, I'm open to certainly any questions that you guys might have. Hi.
First, thank you for coming.
Mhm.
It's a hot topic everywhere.
Yeah.
And the sources of credible information are hard for families to find to get
Sure.
the full facts. So we really felt it was best to have a representative directly come and speak and share the facts. So
I commend you for that.
thank you for doing that. I have just a few questions. The taxation piece and funding piece is complicated, especially for the common household. So I want to make sure that I understood what you were saying, and as it's recorded, then households can understand. If I heard you correctly, you're saying that the state's funding of the public school per pupil remains the same, regardless if the child leaves. The state funding for who remains is intact.
Other.
Actually, it's
That
the
flip-flopped around.
local funding remains no matter how many students leave.
So the income tax and the real estate tax.
That stays
Stays the
100% of it stays locally in the district.
you.
Even if 99% of the students left the district on an Ed Choice or a backpack scholarship, you would retain 100% of your local tax revenue.
Okay, got it. So income tax, real estate tax stays.
Mhm.
State budget gets adjusted per
Correct.
pupil. Thank you
Yes.
for clarifying that for me. A financial question for you. Currently, if a student in an area parochial school has special needs, they have every right to obtain services needed for that child through the local public school.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, in the legislation, is it proposed anywhere that if some of the tax dollars follow the student, that a portion of those tax dollars that followed them come back to the local public school that has to bear the expense of the special needs resources?
Mhm.
So, for example, if we have special needs teachers that we employ under our operating budget, and students in other schools need those, will part of those tax dollars that follow them come back to help share that expense?
Yeah, it's very similar to how the Ed Choice system currently works. So if a student is attending St. Joe's on an Ed Choice scholarship, and through Child Find, they are identified as a student with a learning disability, and they are required to, Fremont is required to provide the IEP and the testing and so forth, then Fremont can claim that student on their report to the state. So at least a portion of it comes back. That's a granular question I can't give a lot of detail on, but the answer would be yes. Fremont would receive funding for that student to provide those services.
Okay. That would be, if I could ask you to follow up on that for
Yeah,
us,
sure.
because in some prior discussions, that's
Yeah.
not what we were led to believe. So I
Right.
think that's an important factor for us to know,
For sure.
as it's a financial piece of it.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I have is I come from the private business sector where competition does improve quality on most products and services that we provide. So I get that perspective completely. And just personally, my preference is about personal and family choice to empower families to be able to do what's best for their child. Two things come to mind, though: making sure that in competition, that everyone is treated as peers playing under the same rules and expectations. And that families can make an educated choice.
Mhm.
In the public arena right now in education, there are the report cards. There's data collected that's published for families to take a look at of how the school is performing. As you mentioned, those in Columbus that are performing very poor, those families don't have a choice. I get that. That is very unfortunate. Would the additional schools receiving the funding that you're proposing, would they be included in the reporting under the same requirements and in the same way so that families could make that comparison?
That is a great question. And we would completely agree with you that in order for a market to function effectively, there has to be full information to the consumer, right? So that when a parent is shopping, so to speak, and it's a crass word sometimes for education, I guess as an educator, I get that part of it. But when a parent is looking for the best fit for their student, we want them to have full information from all the possible providers. So House Bill 290, the backpack bill, has a requirement that any school that participates in the program, because a school can say we're not going to, a private school is allowed to say we're not participating in the backpack program and we won't accept the scholarship. But any school that does choose to participate is required to submit to standardized test scores in both reading and math and annually, and then publish those in a community way through newsletters or on their website. And then they also must provide those scores to the state. So yes, it requires reporting of performance. It's not the exact same report card. I would argue it really doesn't need to be the same report card and shouldn't even be the same report card. Because if we are using the same data, what essentially is the difference between the schools? The point of the market is to provide various options. And I think that's what this does, while still providing open information to parents who are going to be making that choice.
So would the students of the additional schools receiving funding be subjected to all of the standardized testing that public students are?
So currently, any chartered non-public school, as you may be aware, is required to submit to the same graduation requirements that Fremont Ross is required. So all the graduation points, I came from a private school that was chartered, and our students had to accumulate all the same graduation points that students at Fremont Ross had to. That wouldn't change. So those students would continue to have to take the state mandated assessments, earn the points, and accumulate those in order to graduate. They also had to, chartered non-publics also have to do the third grade reading assessment, as well as the fourth grade standardized testing. So the answer to that is those requirements wouldn't change. The bill does institute these other requirements that I just mentioned, where the reading and math assessment has to be done annually for participating schools. And those results have to be published to the school community, prospective parents, and on their through some publicly some public distribution.
Am I understanding you correctly in that the graduation requirements are the same?
Mm-hmm.
2 of the standardized tests are the same. But are you saying that
And that's under the current Ed Choice program.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, it's actually true whether they accept Ed Choice or not. That's part of their chartering requirements.
Okay.
Apart from Ed Choice requirements.
But all of the standardized tests and publication of those that public students are required to do, all of them.
Currently, a chartered non-public school is not required to do all of those.
Okay. And under
the backpack bill, the ones that are currently required would remain. In addition, they would have to do standardized testing that is a nationally recognized standardized test. So it might be MAPS, it might be Stanford, it could be Iowa. Has to be done in reading and math at each grade level.
But not in all of the areas that's currently required of public
It's
students.
reading and math. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But again, that's information that is available to parents, and what the bill does is it allows parents to make that decision. I can guarantee you that those schools are still doing assessments in science, social studies, and so forth. Every school that I know, every private school that I know of was doing those anyway, because there's just some good practice measure to it. And any prospective family could ask the school for that. If the school refuses to give it to them anyway, again, that's a piece of information that the parent can use to decide, do I want to send my child to a school who won't provide test scores on certain things? My guess is most parents would not. But again, that's empowering parents to make that decision to determine what information do I want and need in order to make the best decision for my kid.
I understand your statement that maybe The reporting requirements are different. The report card might look different because the schools are different. You're providing variety and choice and so forth.
And
But
different levels of funding.
Sure. I'm curious to know, though, if we want to make sure that we're providing good quality options, why would we not measure, I guess, the end result, academic understanding and comprehension in all of the subject matters? So I get it that different schools might teach differently. Might have some different subject offerings and so forth. But at the end of the day, I think the curriculum offered in the public school is pretty standard of the various subjects that you have in parochial and private schools as well. So I'm curious as to why we wouldn't measure comprehension of the subject matter, how well each of those schools are developing the understanding of the child in an equal manner.
Yeah. Well, again, two things I would say. Almost certainly those schools are doing it, and any parent would have access to that information if they ask, and if they're not provided, that's part of the information that the parent can use on, is that where I want to send my child? But maybe more importantly is it's a matter of proportion, where Fremont Ross, I don't know what your per pupil spending is. Let's say it's $14,000 per student. All of that comes from public funds, right? A student who takes an Ed Choice scholarship is getting $5,500 to take, not $14,000 to take. And so there's a proportionality argument there that if the state wished to give a family all $14,000 to attend a private school, I think that might open up the discussion a little bit more as should those schools be required to use all of the same assessment tools. For the most part, and I would say the issue that we had at my school with some of the state tests wasn't the idea that we didn't want parents to know. We were assessing our students. We just didn't want to feel bound to the type of test that the state was providing. And so the state gave us the option of using other.
We would agree with you.
Yeah. That's the funny thing, because I know, I think everybody's in agreement with there are issues with that. And so when a school doesn't have to take it, why, if the school believes it has better ways of assessing its students, why wouldn't we allow? Trust me, I wouldn't sit here and say that you guys ought to be bound by some of those requirements also, because I don't think that they're really effective. But
thank you.
Yeah.
But that then becomes part of the issue, with all due respect, is if the state funding, you spoke to proportionality of funding, and because the dollar amount that goes to the Ed Choice schools is lower than what, a public school would get, that alone should preclude the Ed Choice school from having to participate in all of the standardized testing and all of the other rigor that, public schools are required to.
Yeah, I would probably contest the word rigor, because I think all of us probably agree that many of these standardized tests don't have a level of rigor to them.
Noted. Maybe just as far as like state requirements for teachers and educators, period.
Yeah. So certainly there's a proportionality argument to the amount of funding that the student is receiving if they attend the public school versus if they attend the private school via a scholarship like Ed Choice. One thing I want to clarify is that neither the Ed Choice program nor Backpack funds private schools. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled on this issue, including the 2002 Zellman case, which tested the constitutionality of Ohio's own program, right? Susan Zellman was the state superintendent of Ohio at the time when a challenge went against the Ed Choice predecessor, the Cleveland Scholarship Program, and tested its constitutionality. And the court ruled there, and has ruled repeatedly in cases as recently as this summer in the Carson v. Macon case, that these programs do not fund private schools, they fund parents. It's only incidental that the money ends up at a particular school. It's like making the argument that SNAP or WIC payments to low-income families, nobody makes the argument that those fund Kroger or Meijer or Walmart. They don't. They fund parents. It's only incidental that they end up at Kroger or Meijer or Walmart. It's the same thing with these programs. They do not fund private schools. They fund parents. It's only incidental that they end up at a private school.
Well, I think the question remains, certainly, you make a very good point. Is it wise and appropriate spending of tax dollars to participate in litigation? That is brand new to us. And that is something I'm sure we're going to take a long time and a lot of thought and study to decide, because it's not something that should be done lightly. And if it's done at all, I would just say, I wish that we agree that the testing in public education is flawed. Mm-hmm. I wish that if we're going to create competition, which I agree improves quality, that we come a little bit closer in the language of the legislation to make the expectations students are held to equal, that various structures of education are held to the same accountability, which equates to the students. It's not just a matter of the rules a school has to play by, it's the kids inside and what's being expected of them. Yeah. And in my personal opinion, in how they're being treated in the testing process. I would like to see the language be a little more equal in that regard. Yeah. Just a thought.
Yeah. And it's a fair point. And my only response to that would be, one, that we believe that parents ought to be entrusted to be able to interpret those scores differently. If ultimately what we're trying to do is find the best match for the student, then we ought to be able to entrust those people who best know, what system those students will thrive under, and they should be able to get the information they want. If they don't get it, then they shouldn't go there. But again, that's their decision, their choice on where to place the child. And I think you correctly identified the key issue, the key question here is this a valid use of public funds? Because I would say even if you have hesitation or disagreement with the Ed Choice program, I don't think that rises to the level of using public money to file a suit against a democratically enacted program. So I think you're right in identifying that as the key issue.
I have a few questions. For the Ed Choice or backpack, does that, we've talked about private schooled or chartered non-public, does that also apply to an online school, a community school, even homeschooling? I mean, if we're giving a parent full choice, does that open it up to any of those options?
Yeah, it's a great question. So under the House version of the bill, it does allow the parent to use the money that gets placed in their ESA. Because the House version of the bill would work a little bit differently than Ed Choice. In Ed Choice, the parent receives a check that comes to the school, and the school places it in their account, and that's what's used to pay tuition. Under the House version of the bill, it would actually go into an ESA, which is similar to an HSA program, and the parent can use that for approved expenses, which could include private school tuition or homeschooling expenses. So the House version of the bill does allow for usage with homeschool groups. If a community school, if a student chooses to attend a community school, which is a public charter, that funding mechanism isn't affected by backpack bill. They continue to get funded in the same way that they would if they attended a charter school today. Okay, a public charter school, a community school. Okay. Terminology gets confusing in Ohio because we use different terms. But under backpack bill, that doesn't change for students who attend those schools. Under what is expected to be the Senate version of the bill, the workings of it is a little bit different. Essentially, it serves as in the same way that the current Ed Choice program works, which would mean that a homeschool student would not be able to use it for homeschooling expenses because you can't use a current Ed Choice scholarship for homeschooling.
Only because, I mean, we have a community school close by, and I get the fact of there's reporting and that schools should be doing that so that parents can make an informed decision. However, Townsend probably has the largest graduation class of any school around here every year, correct?
It's not as big as it used to be, but it got quite large.
Only
for a
because
while.
they got dinged
Right.
for not reporting correctly.
Right.
So, I mean, that's all well and good to say that the schools that are going to be set up are honest about everything and doing things correctly. However, we can all know that that would not be the case in some cases. I mean, we have students that went to Townsend. They didn't even know where the Townsend building was. They only went to our public library and got some 20 minutes a week of education. And then they still walked away with an Ohio diploma for high school. And my biggest thing with all of it is I love the choice. As a parent, I want to choose. I mean, I want the school to teach my kid what they need to be taught, but I want the choices of what my kid is going to do and where they're going to do it at. I love that part of it. The problem is I want it to be on a fair playing field. And it's so unfair and so lopsided right now. My wife is a second grade teacher for 26 years. You know, do their teachers have to meet the requirements of a public school teacher? Probably not. We've paid out a lot of money to keep her licensing up because of continuing education. Does that have to happen? You know, I get the proportionality of it and everything else, but it still comes down to the fact that if the state of Ohio is saying this is the requirement for someone to graduate high school in the state of Ohio, then that should be the requirement everywhere. And I realize that for public schools, we're held to a higher standard. The state report card is junk. It's ridiculous. Fremont City Schools is never going to have an A on the state report card. Not going to happen. It isn't, because of the way it's set up. School funding has been a hot mess until the Fair Funding Act came into play for a little bit here, and who knows how long that'll even stick around. But if we all play by the same rules, I'm great with choice and I'm great with tax dollars for that parent going wherever they feel the need to go. But we're not fixing the problem. Public schools, in my opinion, are set up to fail right now. There isn't any way for the majority of people they could look at Fremont schools without being a part of Fremont schools and say we're a failure because of test scores, report card grades, whatever it might be. And that's an unfair assumption. But it's because the rules are it's everybody in Columbus, it seems like, doesn't fix a thing. And all we're doing now is it's no different than the old school funding. Let's just keep adding to it, hoping that it gets better. And this, to me, is just adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And we're not addressing the problem. We're just adding to it. And I get that some people will benefit. And I'm all for a kid getting the education where they need it and where they are going to thrive the best at. But man, I like to play by the same rules. Otherwise, man, it's unfair, and I don't like playing like that.
Yeah. Well, a couple things to address your charter school question and the issues that came up with the charter school here locally. Neither the backpack bill nor Ed Choice does anything with community schools. So that is something that's done entirely separately. No regulation changes under either of those programs for community schools. Secondly, obviously you had an issue with a local charter school. However, I could take you down to Columbus and show you the massive problems, deceit, fraud that was done in Columbus public schools.
Oh, it's everywhere.
So this isn't an issue that affects only private schools or community schools because they're unregulated. That's just false. It happens everywhere, as you noted. So I think that should be set aside and shouldn't necessarily enter into the thinking. As a chartered non-public school, my school was audited by the Department of Education, and they would come in and review our records, make sure everything was exactly as we were required to do. In terms of playing by the same rules, I would say this, and this is a big picture issue, that the reason that public schools have been highly regulated by the state is because students traditionally have had only one choice to attend. The example that I use, the metaphor that I use is the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, right? It highly regulates utilities in Ohio because in so many places where you live, you only have one option for water. You have one option for gas. You have one option for electricity. So in order to avoid the utility companies taking advantage of the people who are using their product, the state says, we're going to regulate you. We're going to grant you a monopoly because there are efficiency reasons for it, but we're going to highly regulate you. That, in my opinion, and my argument is, has been the reason why public schools have been regulated like they are, because students living in a school district have had that as the only option for them for so long. When you bring market principles into the place, my argument would be you should start being freed up from some of those regulations. There's no reason for some of them. Those should be done. You guys should be the ones setting what your assessment standards are, what your graduation requirements are, not some bureaucracy in Columbus.
Hello.
That's what this does. I believe this is a step toward breaking the monopoly that exists on families and allowing schools, public, private, community, whatever, homeschooling, whatever, to operate in a decentralized and more efficient manner. And I think the research shows that's what happens when you bring choice to a market.
But will the state officials see it that way?
Right.
I mean, that's the thing.
Right.
We're hinging this. I agree with that. I'm all for bringing in the competition. Man, if you're good at it and you knock it out of the park, you should be rewarded for that. Absolutely. And I agree. But the regulation should go away if we open it up to more choices for a student living inside Fremont.
It should. And I can't sit here and guarantee that they will. That would be my argument, that you guys should be free from that. However, again, I'll go back to my other argument. If the state is giving a student $5,500 to attend a private school versus $14,000 to attend a public school, then I don't think it's a just argument to say that's not a level playing field for the public school that's getting 3 times the amount of funding from public dollars that the student who attends a private school with a choice scholarship gets.
Except for there's 23 times the kids.
Yeah, so you get 23 times the revenue. So it's actually like 69 times the revenue. But my point is, on a per pupil basis, the state is investing triple the money. Public dollars are going triple the money because it's state and local combined. I get that. That they are paying for a student who uses a choice scholarship. And so I don't think it's fair to say there's not a level playing field, because I think the parents who use a scholarship would say, no, the level playing field goes in the other way. Why am I only getting $5,500 when if my kid went to my public district, he'd be getting 3 times that? So I would say that the argument, I don't agree with the idea that it's not a level playing field. I believe if the argument is to be made, it could easily be made that it's not a level playing field because the student on the choice scholarship doesn't get anything close to the level of funding that a student who attends a public school gets.
I think one thing that we would probably agree on is that regulation increases costs. That's historically always been true.
Mm-hmm.
So the entity that holds the highest burden of regulation is going to carry the highest cost.
Sure. And I think
So
that's the argument that I would say why the non-level playing field doesn't work, because the 3 times the amount of funding more than negates, in my opinion, any additional regulatory burden, which isn't as great as you might think. Every chartered non-public school in the state has to abide by the state operating standards, just like public schools do. It's not as great as of a difference as you might think. But I think that's to the point, is if the state wants to give $14,000 in Ed Choice or Backpack Scholarship, then I think we can have the discussion on should private schools that students who take that scholarship attend be required to submit to the same testing standards. But I will say, even so, they are required, again, they are required to do the same graduation requirements that a student at Fremont Ross is required to do. So students who attended my school had the exact same graduation requirements that Fremont Ross had.
So why aren't we writing the law so it is that way?
Right.
Right.
I'm great with 14,000 going with whatever student and wherever they want to
Because
go.
the state doesn't have the authority to capture local tax revenue. It only has the authority to capture state revenue. So none of the money, none of the money in Ed Choice or in Backpack touches the local tax revenue that you receive.
So then I don't see how you're taking 14,000 and
Right.
saying that the state is funding 14,000 per.
I didn't. I should correct. The word I think I used was public funding, not state funding. It's $14,000 in public funding
So,
that the
so
students
and I
receive.
understand that because we'd have to go back a lot of years to go back to what levies were passed locally and all that kind of stuff to figure that out. That'd be a hot mess to try to change. I get that part of it. But if we're looking at just what the state, because that's what the law, what this House bill is trying to do, or the Senate bill is taking the state portion of that funding and going to that. Again, I believe then that that dictates a level playing field because we're only talking about state dollars.
Right.
We're not doing the local part. So to say, well, the school is funded publicly $14,000 or whatever. I get that. We're only talking about the state part here.
Well, again, I think you can't just leave out the local property tax revenue in consideration of this. Secondly,
Right,
I would.
But over the history, though, if you have a let's say there's a new school that's going to start up to help with an ed choice or a backpack bill where they can get that funding and something new starts up like you were talking about in Columbus. How long? I mean, that school probably hasn't been around for very long.
3 months.
Okay. So brand new school. So let's say you have a brand new school like that. They shouldn't get the locally funded part because that locally funded part built this building. They don't have the cost of that building. So I don't see how it's comparing apples to apples. If you have a school that's 3 months old and they have 30 some students, to compare that to say, yeah, but Columbus City is getting 14,000 per pupil because of
Actually, Columbus City is getting about 24,000 per
so
pupil.
24,000 then from public money. I get that, but they've built those schools over centuries to house those students because of that's how it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not opposed to the choice, but it seems like we're comparing two different things when we're saying, I mean, if we're talking about the state money, it should look different, but it should still be the same playing field because the locally funded part shouldn't play a part in what we're looking at, what the state is funding per pupil.
Mm-hmm.
And to say it's a level playing field for that $5,500 or whatever it is for the state, then that part should be the same. That local stuff, I don't know. I don't see the correlation.
Well, again, the difference between what the state requires Fremont students to do in terms of testing is really not that different than what schools who accept the backpack scholarship would be required to do under House Bill 290. Right. It's just not that different. It's a different test, but it's not that different. The level of assessment is marginal if it exists at all.
I think from some households, and I hope you can understand possibly from our educators too, who are dictated which tests they have to administer. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some doubt. You know, if someone else gets to choose something different, there will always be that doubt of, do they truly show an equal picture? Do they show an equal rigor? Do they show, and unless it's equal, it's not equal in a common perspective.
And I guess that comes down to, do we trust parents to make that decision for their child? We would argue that yes, I would rather have a parent make that decision than an educational bureaucrat that sits in Columbus.
I think if we were talking about the same assessments, the same expectations of achievement, the same methods of measuring those things, and the same level of regulatory freedom, we'd have a whole different conversation. We like Tom said, I think probably the common household would say state and local. Yeah, you even it all out, it would be a different conversation. So I think that's just from the perspective of those with more regulation and dictated to which tests and how by non-professional educators even.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic. Obviously, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying.
Yeah,
but I would say that the difference between what regulation you're under at Fremont Ross is not significantly different than what a private school is required to do. Again, under this, they're going to have a standardized test, and they may have an option of 4 or 5 different tests that they can do, that they can choose, but the teacher's still going to have that dictated to them by their school administrator. But again, my point, I think, is that is information that parents ought to be able to adjudicate as to whether this or that particular school would best serve their student. There's no need for an exact same methodology where everything is the same, because then we just become one single system again. And that's what the market doesn't want to do. That's what the market wants, to provide varying options for families. And so I think that's what it does. Again, I think the fundamental question becomes are these things a big enough issue to use public money that residents who, some of whom are using this option, paying in their taxes to challenge a bill that was democratically enacted.
Okay. Any other questions?
I've got a couple, if I may.
Yeah.
First of all, you're a trooper. You've been at this an hour. You need a glass of water.
Well, my car ride was 2.5, so I might as well make it worth it. Thank you
again for coming. Troy. Really appreciate it. Miss Mooney spoke before you came. She's just came here and says tax dollars belong in public schools and public dollars should follow public institutions. What would you say to her?
Well, I mean, there are any number of programs, education or otherwise, where that's not the case, right? Pell Grants. Do Pell Grants only go to Ohio State? No, Pell Grants can go to any private university in the country. Again, SNAP or WIC money, that's public money. Those go to families and they're spent at private institutions like Walmart. So almost we wouldn't expect somebody who receives WIC payments to purchase food for their child to have to shop at a government-owned grocery store. So why do we expect a government-owned run school to be the only option for that student?
You use the word fit, and I think it's appropriate. If a child or parents find that the school doesn't fit, they can go somewhere else. But in our experience here, a couple times from our local private schools, the student didn't fit, and the school said, "There's the door," and they come back to us. I don't have the power to say, you know what? You're not a fit. Your behavior, your disability, your whatever, your predisposition to behavior, whatever that is, public schools don't have that. And to me, that's a crucial difference between what power a non-chartered public school would have versus a true public school. And I worry about that child. And I think it's that underdog child, the one with the behavior issues, the one with the severe, I've got students at almost $20,000 in special ed cost alone, above cost of a normal, and say, typical child, sorry. So where's that go, Troy? I don't know what to do.
That's a great question. And it's a legitimate one. Here's the response I would give to that. For that particular child, the scenario you cast says he wasn't a fit at the public or at the private school. They would not continue enrollment for whatever reason, and he has to come back to the public school. That is no worse of a scenario than if we didn't have any choice to begin with. He still ends up at the local public school, and he's still fully funded.
But I'm being compared to the school that doesn't have to keep him.
Yeah, so the point being that at least he had the option to try another school. If he ends up with only the only option is his local public school, that's no different than if we eliminated all the choice programs anyway. That would be his only option.
But that's a game changer. That's a huge game changer.
Meaning?
Well, if I'm running a school where I can say, you know what, if you aren't academically apt to it, or if you aren't socially up to it, if you're not behaviorally up to it, I'm going to send you on down the road. Oh, look at my scores. I'm crushing the public school.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's no doubt that there are certain advantages built into private school performance. Okay, I was at a private school for 27 years. I understand that, right? I understand the metrics. I understand why we outscored Columbus City.
Right.
At the same time, as you know, there are metrics within those standardized scores that measure how a student performs in comparison to their ability, right? And so those, I think, are the most important metrics, not the raw data on percentile ranks or anything. How does a student perform compared to his ability? And again, I would say in that instance that that is, I think any parent who knows their child will be able to make that determination. So it's not, again, this isn't meant to pit private schools against public schools. It's not. Both of these bills, both Ed Choice and Backpack, are meant to allow every school in the state to flourish. Right? So
Says the private school guy.
well, again, the scenario that you paint, I think the public school ends up no worse than if that student had to attend there anyway because he didn't have any other choice. So I don't completely understand the argument that says because giving a student a choice that he can't have, he ends up worse than if he didn't have that choice to begin with.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the school's point of view, though.
Yeah.
Okay, the child, yeah, I get it. He's back where he would have been anyway, or she. But I'm still competing against a private school because we have now access to the same dollars. Now, you would say
It's not the same dollars.
I know.
But yeah.
I know where you're going.
And I think that's the answer to that. The answer to that is the significantly more funding that the public school receives. Because I think rightly the state says we have a vested interest in making sure that every child has an education. That is the function of public schools. And that would be almost certainly the first option for nearly every student in the state. We're under no illusion that 50% of students are going to take one of these scholarships and attend private schools. They're not. But for those that do, it's a great option for them. And again, I go back to the data that says 27 studies have looked at what effect has this had on public school students' academic performance. 25 of them show a positive effect.
And I've seen some charter school studies that say they're a disaster.
Well, some charter schools are. I mean, again, I'm not here to make the argument that private schools are better than public schools. I'm not. I'm saying parents ought to be empowered to determine which school is the best fit for their kid. A lot of times that's going to be a public school. Sometimes it's going to be a private school. Sometimes it's going to be homeschool. But until we give parents the ability to make that decision, we are not operating efficiently. This is, I lost where I was going with that. But, I know what it was. President Price, the question that you brought up about fair playing field and regulatory burdens and so forth and accountability, I know that was it's kind of built into that question. I will tell you that as a private school administrator, I could easily make the argument that my school was far more accountable than the public school district that we resided in. Because no matter what that public school's test scores came back, there are no state sanctions. If scores are low, funding is not withheld unless a parent chooses to take a scholarship. But at a private school, if my school is not meeting a parent's expectations, I face the ultimate accountability. The ultimate accountability is that parent taking their money and going somewhere else. Until all schools have the accountability that come with parents being able to take their money and leave, this is all just faux accountability. You guys intuitively know this. You know that those state report cards aren't a valid accountability measure. It's a simulacra of accountability. It's not real accountability. Until parents can take their funding and go to another option, there's no real accountability, public or private. That's what this bill does.
But in the court of public opinion, that's horribly inaccurate. So when the grade card comes out and let's say everything is maybe not to a parent's liking, the firing squad starts with the superintendent, goes down to, every teacher and janitor in the building. You know what I mean? The accountability from the public is different. So to just kind of glaze.
Well, it may be different, but I'll say it's still there. I could tell you any manner of illegitimate accountability issues that I had with parents at the school I was at, right? Parents wanted to hold us accountable for things that we really weren't responsible for or whatever.
Amen to that.
I don't think
we've all been there and done that. Yeah.
So I think those issues still exist even at the private schools. They look different because there are different issues there.
But even what you cite, as a administrator in a private school, the loss of funding
Mhm.
is devastating, or has the potential to be devastating to your school.
Yeah, I mean, if we are performing so poorly that a significant number of families leave, we need to right size. We have to downsize. We have to reduce staff. We have to make adjustments,
Sure.
just like any other enterprise in the private sector does.
Certainly. So I don't think, I'll speak for myself as a parent. The issue isn't necessarily about choice. We want parents to be empowered. We want them to be educated about, options and whatnot. I think the fundamental issue is the issue of state funding and where it goes, not necessarily parents having the choice or not.
Yeah, I think those two are linked, though, right? I mean, I think you can't make an issue of the state funding and where it goes unless you give parents the option to take it somewhere. And that's the only
I could
point.
go enroll my child. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay.
But I could go as a private citizen, enroll my daughter at St. Joe
Mhm.
if I felt so compelled to do so.
And you could afford it. I mean, that's the issue, right?
Don't clock my pocket.
The issue is you're getting double. You're paying twice. You're paying your local property tax revenue that goes to your public school, and then you're having to pay private school tuition on top.
But even as a parent, I think we got to be really clear about like how that information gets dispelled. So when you were talking about $14,000 versus $5,500, I was like, oh, okay, that's a situation. But then when you were talking about $14,000, which included the local dollars, I'm like, that's different.
Well, there are certainly some school districts across the state that receive over $20,000 a year per pupil.
But that
from the
includes
state.
the local funding?
No, from the state.
Oh, from
so
the
Columbus
state.
Public gets $20,000. Dayton, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, they're all
heavily populated.
oh, sure. But again, that's one of the points on the Ed Choice lawsuit is joining in a lawsuit that joining the lawsuit doesn't just affect Fremont local schools. It affects 50-some thousand students
Noted.
across the state attending a variety of districts
Noted,
that
and I
would lose
appreciate you
their
saying
option.
that. Sure.
I have a comment to John's point about your ability to identify a student that doesn't fit
Mhm.
and direct them to somewhere else for their education. If we think about giving a parent a choice, they do have a true choice with the public district in that they can say, I want my children to receive their education from Fremont City schools. And we're obligated to provide them with that. In the other arenas, are they really given a choice? Isn't it ultimately then up to the school's administration of whether or not their child receives their education at that institution? If you don't have the ability, I mean, if you don't have the same requirement to retain the child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, certainly it's not unlimited choice, right? But the one thing I want to address is they have the choice to attend Fremont schools. They actually don't, because the state compels them to send their child to school. This I think I haven't addressed this yet. This, in my opinion, is the fundamental reason for choice programs like Ed Choice and Backpack. If the state both compels education, which it does, and controls where the parents send their child for that education, that is way too much power in the hands of the state. Choice programs like Ed Choice and Backpack break that usurpation of power. That is, it would. My friend Bill, who spoke to you, I think last month, likes to make the argument, well, we don't have pool choice. We don't have bus choice, where if somebody doesn't like the public pool, they get funded to go to a private pool. And my response to him always is, Bill, the state doesn't compel you to go to a pool. It doesn't compel you to use a bus. It does compel you to send your kid to school. And so the state shouldn't be able to do that and also control where your child goes.
And I also just want to say, echo to what John said, you have done a wonderful job. Truly, to those who support the bill, you've done them proud tonight.
Thanks.
You have. And to the households that weren't informed, I think that you brought that perspective very clearly. And again, I thank you for giving us credible information to give to our households so they don't just have to look it up on Facebook and all of that. So I want to thank you for that.
Again, I commend you guys for being willing to engage in the conversation, and thank you so much for the invitation to address you tonight. John, I think you have my contact information. If you have any other questions,
Oh,
feel
I'm going to
free
be firing them off, Troy. You bet.
Yeah.
You and I are just started.
And I know Representative Click is also interested in this, and he was ill tonight and unable to make it. So he's in bed with a fever.
Sorry.
And I know he shares our opinion in overregulation being stifling for
Certainly does,
education.
for
So
the
I
record,
know
yeah.
that part of the conversation's not over, and he's there for us with that, and we appreciate it.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the work that you guys do on behalf of your
Thank you
kids.
very much.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody need a potty break? Everybody good? All right.
So we did the calendar, so we stopped right after the calendar.
Yes.
So moving on to recommendations of the superintendent.
Yes, thank you very much. We're going to pass it right off to the Mrs. King show. And we would like to just give, because this is kind of on our schedule and this all worked together, but like, if your permission, we'll keep it kind of brief. It kind of jumped in my mind. We talked about regulation. This is Mr. Parker. I'm going to let Sue introduce kind of what Brent does for us and what we're going to talk about tonight. And I'll stop talking.
Okay. Good evening. Mr. Parker is our lead mentor for our resident educator program. And the resident educator program falls underneath the umbrella of my office. So that's why I'm here introducing him. But I brought the expert so that he can give you all the ins and outs. But basically, the educator program is made to assist and mentor our new teachers coming in. It works in accordance with ODE, and there are some mandates through ODE, but we do have trained teachers, and Mr. Parker works very diligently to match those with our teachers. And without further ado, I will let our resident expert here, Mr. Parker, take it over.
Hello, board. Tonight, we'll briefly go over the resident educator program here that we've devised and how it's evolved over time at Fremont City Schools. Just a brief history. It began in 2011. It is a state mandated item that we've discussed a lot tonight. What happens is this usually typically involves a college graduate, a recent college graduate, graduates from college. They apply for what the ODE calls the 4-year resident educator provisional license. This also now has affected teachers that move in from out of state. So usually the teachers that we have coming in as part of the resident educator program are college grads, but we do have some this year that have come from out of state, have multiple years experience, but the state of Ohio said, if you have 30 years experience, that's great in Michigan, but here we're going to have you do this resident educator program. So I don't want to muddy the waters. This is for any new teacher in the state of Ohio. Okay. The RE program was originally designed by the state as a comprehensive multi-year induction program resulting in eligibility for professional licensure. So what they did is it just happened to start as a 4-year program. It just so happens that medical students have a residency of 4 years typically. So I think they borrowed from that, from the medical field. The Ohio Resident Educator Program can be envisioned as a journey of continued professional learning. So the goal is to lead educators to more effective practices and excel in teaching. What it is to take these new teachers under someone's wing that has experience, that's formally trained, and help guide them through their first few years of teaching, which can be some of the worst years of teaching I know from experience, of a teacher's career, just because you think you come out of college prepared. They've taught you everything. And day two, because day one, you're in a haze. Day two, you realize, oh boy, I have a lot to learn. So that's where this resident educator program comes in. So we do have state certified mentors. We cannot just choose a mentor that's in our teaching staff. They have to be certified by the state. So if you look at the second bullet there, they need to have hold or have previously held for retired teachers the 5-year professional teaching license or permanent license. They need to complete the district application process and be selected to serve. And they need to attend and successfully complete the RE. Anytime you see RE, it's resident educator. It's some of the jargon here. They have to attend that Mentor Academy for 2 days, full days, and the district administrators are not permitted to be mentors. This should be a teacher to teacher item. The administrator is the evaluator. At no point does a mentor or the program coordinator or anyone involved in this program evaluate a teacher. This is just for consultation and helping guide these teachers through their first few years of their career. Currently, we have 41 state certified mentors on staff. All right, and we'll get to how many REs we have and whatnot here in a minute. This is a transitional year, so 22-23 is the last year from a 4-year program, and the state has buttoned it up and minimized it down to a 2-year program, which will start next school year for 23-24. This reduces the amount of years and work that a RE needs to complete to earn the eligibility to apply for a 5-year professional teaching license. That's the end goal of the program. Once the student or the new teachers get through the program and they're eligible to apply for a 5-year teaching license, which they will then renew every 5 years for the rest of their career. This changes the requirements for this year's year 1 and year 2 resident educators. So we'll kind of go through that real quick here in a minute. These are the 4 years that we currently are under. I'm sorry, that's kind of hard to read on the right. The mentoring year, that is basically is assigned to a mentor is assigned to the resident educator. They do various observations of other colleagues and peers. One of the things that we stress in Fremont City Schools is you need to go watch other people teach. You will learn a lot on what to do and what not to do in your classroom by watching others. The other thing that we talk about are having quality conversations with the mentors, between the resident educator and the mentors, and also self-reflection. There's nothing better than sitting down and self-reflecting to see what's working, what's not working, and pretending everything's working fine is just lying to them. There's always something to improve on. Year 2 currently is a mentoring year as well. Same type of format. The only thing we do at a local level is they need to videotape themselves, video record themselves teaching a lesson. They need to go back and watch it. And there's a reflection document that forces them to go and ask guided questions to look for when they go back and watch themselves. Because most people don't understand that when they're up in front of a group of people, you could go into the zone, and it isn't until you watch it back. I'm sure you guys watch the old board meetings, right, on the YouTube channel. But if you did, sometimes, you might say, or, like I'm saying, but you go back and you watch it and you figure out things that you're doing. Also, there's issues maybe with classroom management you aren't knowledgeable about when you're in the moment up teaching, that they can look back and say, yeah, I got to keep an eye on that corner of the room. These kids were not paying attention. And so they do that. They turn that in at the end of the year. Year 3 is the RESA year. This is where the state takes over complete control over deeming this resident educator as a quality teacher or not. So for year 1, 2, and 4, it is locally controlled. We dictate what they have to do, how they do it, who they do that with. And then year 3, they have to record themselves videoing or record themselves teaching a lesson, just like in year 2. And they have to fill out 2 different forms that accompany that, and they have to submit it to the state. And the state has assessors that that have applied and gone through the process to being certified, and they watch a 20-minute clip of that teacher teaching and deem them appropriate to pass the rest of the year. So that's currently year 3. Year 4 is a leadership year. It's only for people that passed RESA, and this is an experience for the new teachers to become a leader in their building or district. They have to do some kind of activity that takes them and puts them in a leadership role, and it usually deals with adult stakeholders instead of students. It's how do you share your knowledge with peers, colleagues, parents, whomever it might be, that gives them that experience. Well, for next year, that got chopped down to 2 years. We have the mentoring year. So that's the same as it was before. We did move year 2, the video and the reflection forms, to year 1, because they need that experience to get them prepared for the rest of the year, which is now year 2. So currently this year, we not only have year 3 resident RESA candidates, but we also put the year 2s in there as well, because next year there won't be a year 3 to have them participate. So our year 2s this year will participate in RESA. Some of them were not happy about that, just because they thought they had another year to kind of get their feet under them before they, submit this video to the state. And by the way, the deadline for that is February 2nd. So all of our teachers next year will have to submit their video and all the evidence to the state by February 2nd in their second year of teaching. So they're not even through a full 2 years of teaching before they submit that.
Can I ask a real quick question before I forget it? Do they get to choose on which day and which lesson they're going to video themselves?
They can.
Okay.
It's
Like same day choice, like be able to see the attendance in the classroom. Great day for
what they do is when they fill out
So today's the day.
when they fill out the accompanying document, it kind of gives them the assessor a demographic of the room, the lesson they're teaching, those types of things. But yes, they can. I encourage them to shoot multiple videos and then choose the best one that they think that the assessors will. There's a rubric that the state gives out. So they have an ability to go through and look at the checklist and say, do I have all of these things checked to pass the RESA? So that's, so that's kind of where we set there for next year and part of this year, because like I said, we had to combine those. So this year, like I said, we combined, or we're doing year number 1. We currently have 6 people in year 1. In years 2 and 3, we're combining those for the rest of the year. There's 6 resident educators there. And we have 3 that are very unhappy because they have to do year 4 this year, even though it won't exist next year. But the regulation states we still need to do that. So currently we have 15 resident educators within our district, and they're spread out from K to 12 throughout the district.
Quick question on the RESA part of it. So when they submit that, is it, how can I say this nicely? Is it just something that the state is doing just to do? I mean, does anybody ever not pass?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
So it's taking control from the local school again and saying, this reminds me of the 3rd grade reading guarantee when we're doing it on a computer. It makes no sense. So you're saying you're going to base this person's qualification off of one 20-minute video of a second-year teacher who's taught the equivalent of maybe a year and a half.
Yes.
And then what are the disciplinary actions for not do they have to do it again, like resubmit?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay,
I have those ramifications.
I don't mean to jump ahead.
No, that's okay.
Riveted to my, it's like, come on.
So
Where's the bloodshed, right?
That's right.
So I kind of went over this. This is what year 1 does. The key for year 1 is literally having those guided conversations with the mentors. The requirement is they meet at least once a month in some fashion. Usually they communicate more than that, either via text. A lot of them, they they are in the same building, so they have the opportunity to meet more frequently and face to face, which we encourage. But sometimes our mentors are not in the same building, so we're doing cross school district communications, but they do need to meet face to face at least once a month. Like I said, they had to video themselves. I have them upload everything into Google Drive through a website that I'll show you in a few minutes. And with that video, they need to fill out the assess, plan, teach form, which is basically mimicking what they'll see in that resident or the rest of the year, just to prepare them for what they need to do. And like I said earlier, I do encourage them to video as many lessons as possible, not only so they can see the best lesson they've taught, but also so they can reflect back and see what these key issues that might be, continually coming up. This is same thing. I'm sorry. This is RESA. This is the 20-minute lesson like we've discussed. And then there's two forms that document what is seen, the demographics in the room, all that kind of stuff. So it's all fitting within that one 20-minute video montage. They do have to, if they record 45 minutes of a lesson, they have to upload all 45 minutes. They cannot edit it. They cannot cut it. They can't do anything. But what they do is they have like this little slider that says from this point to this point, I only want the assessor to watch that. I don't know if the assessors do that, but that's what they're hired to do. Anyways, but they are not allowed to edit anything. If they do, they will automatically fail RESA. So no iMovie for them. What happens when an RE passes RESA? They can become a 5-year professional teaching license holder and not worry about it again. And then they go through the 5-year renewal process, just like every other teacher, with either taking graduate level classes or CEUs for professional development. And they successfully exit out of the resident educator program. So from the 4-year to the 2-year, this year's year 2's and year 3 resident educators, if they successfully pass RESA, at the end of the year, we have the LPDC committee, a member of them, come in and walk them through applying for their license and also getting an IPI dip, and individualized, personalized professional development plan. And they have to decide what they're going to do over the next 5 years to continue that 5-year license. So all of that happens within our district as well at the end of the year, once we find out in mid-April-ish, usually, if they pass or not. Historically, we have had people not pass. They are not eligible to apply for a 5-year teaching license. It will get denied if they apply. The Ohio Revised Code says they should be permitted no more than 3 total attempts to successfully complete the performance-based assessment, which is RESA. So yeah, 3 times. After that 3rd time of unsuccessful attempts, they're permanently ineligible to renew, extend, or advance to a professional license in the respective areas. So they basically are done.
I was going to say, is there any other license that lets you keep going? I mean,
not after 3 attempts. No.
So that's the only license that they.
Basically, at that point, they're done with teaching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
But it's not locally determined.
I mean, in all seriousness, you'd be a pretty hot candidate at some schools that wouldn't require the licensure but would recognize the training.
But trying to get the state funding.
Correct.
No, and we have had people multiple times not pass. There's been one person that has failed twice. And I will say that most of the attempts, out of my perspective, is they did not take this seriously. They thought it was another hoop to jump through. They did the basic stuff that they thought they would just coast through, and it did not go through as smoothly as they thought. The people did watch it. They scrutinized every part of it. And, sometimes it just doesn't work out to coast through and it just expect that you're going to pass. So it is more difficult than.
And I get that it should be, because, I mean, ultimately you're going to be teaching kids.
Yeah.
You should be able to do well at it.
Yeah.
If you can't, then you shouldn't be a teacher. I mean, But there are bad teachers. I mean, there are bad teachers that, I mean, I had bad teachers that were teachers for 30 some years, but they still had their job because they didn't have this. But, and I get taking it serious, but man.
Is there, do you know, percentage of teachers that fail?
I don't know the actual percentage for our district. I will say, and I don't know if it's because of COVID, but we haven't had anyone fail in the last since COVID.
I was just thinking, so we got a little bit of prep by everybody to have to video lessons and put it out there for online classes. So there might have been a
Yeah, well, and the other issue were masks. It was hard to understand some of the students because it was muffled. Because most of the resident educators are using like an iPhone or an Android phone to record this because we do offer them a little camcorder, but most of them choose to use their own device because it's easier to transition or transfer files and whatnot. So the microphones aren't the greatest. Sometimes it's hard to understand that dialogue, especially when we were wearing masks. But those are, to answer your question, we haven't had anyone in I think 3 or 4 years not
There's
pass.
a tremendous pressure too, just to give us candidates. I mean, we're struggling so hard to fill positions. I think there's also a lot of pressure. I think it'd be hard for them to say, oh, we're going to knock off a 30 or people here and not get them licensed as quickly as possible, just because there's such a high teacher demand in the state.
I was going to say, first, I'm all about increasing the quality of education by increasing the quality and talent and skills of the educator. That makes sense. I don't understand why we don't want that same thing for every child, no matter where they go to school. That we're talking about that again, I know, but it isn't about just what we expect of the school. It's ultimately what happens with the child. What does that child receive? So if this is a good thing, why don't we want it for all of our kids legislatively? And
If it isn't, we should scrap it and get on.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Goes two ways.
Again, another question, is this part of Ed Choice or Backpack that their teachers have to pass RESA?
I doubt it.
I mean,
and I've heard the careful.
and I
I don't
think-
know all those.
right. But I mean,
but
it's
that
a
would be
fair
good
question.
to know
Exactly.
as we make a decision at
Sure.
some point here.
Might
All
follow
those
up with
pieces are
Mr. McIntosh. Yeah.
yeah, good things for us to have. And again, I'm not opposed to increasing the skills and talents of an educator. It's, developing people is a great thing, but I do wonder, because do you remember that legislative bill that was all about making sure the bus drivers were the best available, and the requirements to get a license of a bus driver went through the roof to the point that we don't have any now.
Yeah.
And we already have a shortage of teachers nationally. So I wonder a little on the practicality of some of this stuff. And in the end, what will the impact on our workforce be? We have an impact on workforce in every field. And boy, do we need teachers. So I worry
Imagine
about that.
you're a freshman in college in your intro to education class, and you learn about RESA. You think, wow, I don't know.
Why do I want to do this?
If something else is tempting you, it's just one more thing to tip the scale.
And the other part I think too is, and it goes back to regulation, is Fremont City Schools can't function on, I mean, there's a certain number of teachers you have to have. In any other business where we're short of employees, I mean, I've had to adjust at the cookie shop because I don't have enough employees, and I can adjust that.
The kids are still coming.
Can't. I offer a different product, or I don't offer a certain product because
Reduce
I
your
don't have enough
hours.
people to make it.
Yeah.
However, how does a school district do that when the state is regulating what they have to do? Oh yeah, and by the way, we're going to regulate maybe how many people you have too, because I mean, hopefully they've been lenient, like you said. It's been a few years since anybody's failed, and I hope they play that. But
Brent, did you ever hear why they went from 4 to 2? Any speculation on that?
I will say that I can't remember when I took over the program, probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And when it started in 2011, it was even more rigorous than it is now. So they've slowly but surely tweaked it and backed off as we move through. And I think
so somebody proposed it, and it went, and it passed in 2011. And then some people that had some common sense started looking at it and saying, we need to back off of this because it's way too much.
Or you hear the honest feedback of, the U's of the world and teachers who are impacted, and you see how the process go. I mean, that's standard with any process. You put something in place because on paper it
looks
sounds
great.
like we nailed it. We got a great idea, a great system,
Yep.
and in theory, it's awesome. In practicality, it's not so much.
Yep.
So I think that's a respectable process to go through. I think it's respectable that we hold our teachers to a standard, because we do want the best for our children. I'm sure that, and I don't know if you're going to speak to this, like what kind of things they're looking at, like basic level, like what kind of things are they graded on per se? At the state
It's
level.
various. The rubric will lay all of that out for them. They're looking for, engagement of the students, what type of curriculum they're using. The one thing I will say that very few people pass when they're lecturing. If you shoot a video and the teacher's up front lecturing to those students and they're all sitting there, those are typically the type of videos that are and assessments that get denied. It's the type of teacher that's with their students, interacting in groups, moving around the room, facilitating learning, putting some of the learning in the students' hands. Those are the aspects that those assessors are looking for.
I'm here for it.
I think just for teachers that are coming into the district from other states, or is this for all?
This is for any new teacher to education in Ohio,
Okay.
including those coming in from other states.
So,
that
but
do
once
have.
you've passed this, then you just do every 5 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not pulling teachers randomly from rooms going,
No,
you need
right.
to
Brand
do
new.
this.
No. The only thing I say that, even as a program coordinator, the only flaw I see is that if the assessing administrator, the evaluating administrator, goes in and does multiple evaluations and walkthroughs through those teachers' rooms throughout the year, and they're not seeing an issue, and there's no red flags with that teacher, and now the state's saying, Fremont City Schools, you have that teacher, you guys don't see any issues with them, but that one assessor did for that 20-minute lesson. Sorry, we're going to have to get rid of them. And that's the only thing. There's a very little local control based on that RESA, and that seems to be what they want, local control. But that's the only Achilles heel here is that doesn't exist within the program.
I would agree with that. I'm okay with the video idea. I mean, honestly, years ago in banking, when you first got into lending and you had to do a loan closing and go over all the legalities, they would video us practicing that to make sure that we created
everything.
understanding, that we did educate the borrower. And it is amazing what you see in yourself, what you might have missed, or just are you presenting things in the way that you would hope to. It's very valuable. It's the local control issue that our very educated administrators and mentor teachers with all the credentials in the world and experience and a proven care for kids aren't entrusted to take care of their hometown school and what's provided to those kids. That bugs me a lot.
Or at least some balance. Like the state would have a say at some level. These things would need to be improved to be this level, or you know what I mean, or whatever.
They do have 3 attempts, so it's not like it's one and done. But but still, that local conversation does not get to.
So
it
the
does
state
not exist.
evaluator, after their assessment, and let's say a state evaluator thought this teacher failed, they don't ever contact, because obviously they know the program, so they know there's a mentor teacher involved back at the local level. There's no conversation with that mentor. It's just, this is the word of the evaluator, and it's done.
There are ways to appeal,
But
most people just say, you know what, I'll just do it again next
Do you get
year.
a written assessment, and will they know in
Rationale.
what areas they?
They do give them a score report. That comes out in April, mid-April. So they get a score report from the state. It gives them an overall score, and then it does, based on that rubric, show where they were deficient, if anywhere, and where they thrive. So they do get
at least there's
feedback.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we focus on the positive, we bring this. This is a bad meeting to have this. We're all riled up, you know. But it sounds
Going to
like
Columbus with me tonight.
right now. No.
Camping outside.
I can drive the bus. Let's go.
It's not that cold out.
It sounds like there's been improvement locally to how the newer teachers are responding to the process, and that it's going better than it
Yeah.
has. And
Well, and I think it's, I try to stress with them, you need to take this seriously. You don't want to base your whole career on 20 minutes of poor teaching
Sure.
just because you think they're just going to, check off, they did the video, they're done. That's not how it works. I mean, the assessors really do take it seriously, and they should. And just like our resident educator, if they're not taking this seriously, then, maybe they're taking not taking other things seriously that matter in the classroom. So
listen, I'm John Lewis's daughter, and the one lesson that was you play the way that you practice, and if you don't practice hard, we have that expectation of children, whether it's in the arts, whether it's athletics, or in the classroom. We have that expectation of children. We should have that expectation of teachers. Maybe with a little bit more local control and all that, but I think it's good to challenge our staff so that the kids get the best quality outcome.
I think the best part of the program is the mentorship. Before this, we would offer it was like, so and so is going to be your mentor for the next year, but it was not a paid position. People were just kind of, you're both history teachers, you're the mentor for that teacher, and I can't say that it was as successful, nowhere near as successful as this. The mentors are a paid position, so they do sign a contract. They are signing on to take this resident educator on for the next now 2 years, which used to be 3. And so I think that's the best part, is having a conversation with a teacher that has experience, but also that ability for those resident educators to get out within their building and see other people teach, because that's a game changer. Watching themselves on video is huge, but also going and see a veteran teacher, another newer teacher here, a 10-year teacher here. Those different experiences are fundamental to how they can get positive and negatives on how they can change their own instruction, classroom management, whatever that might be.
Well, kudos to all those mentor teachers who are putting in that time and effort and energy with the younger.
Yeah,
Newer not younger, but
it's a
newer
lot
teachers.
to ask, but they do a great job, and they take it seriously. And I'm not, as a program coordinator, I'm not allowed to watch any of the rest of videos. So all of that is on the resident educator and their mentor to offer suggestions in that. So they can't send me the video and say, hey, can you take a look at this? It's against the rules of the program for me to do that. So those mentors are key in helping them offer suggestions on what they can fix and those types of things. Leadership year they don't require a mentor. It doesn't matter because it's over after this year anyway. But typically, like at the bottom there, it's the activities can deepen content expertise, so they can go and participate in some PD, maybe teach some PD, putting them up in front of peers and sharing their knowledge. Because a lot of our newer teachers do have a lot of knowledge that they bring to the table when it comes to technology and integrating newer instructional practices within the classroom, so they can actually present that to the staff at their building or in the district for that matter. Teacher leadership, it's also a huge thing for a person that is a resident educator year 4. They passed RESA, so they knew what they did and how they did it. And that's a valuable resource that even a mentor can't give because they've never gone through the process. Mm-hmm. Some have, but not many. So that gives them the expertise to sit down with one of a resident educator in year 3 RESA and give them tips, pointers, whatever, just to help them guide them through that process to make them more successful. So it is a community program. It's not just the resident educator on their own island trying to figure this out on their own. Everyone, rallies around them and does try to push them forward in a positive way. that's what I do. I don't know if you care about that too much. Basically, I just organize all of this. So I plan, implement, and report on the resident educator program to Mrs. King, and facilitate the evaluation of the local program. I usually pair mentors with resident educators. Many times I go to the building administrators and they ask the principals, you've got this new person. Is there anyone on this list that you think might be a good fit, either grade level wise, content level wise? And a lot of the times we make those fit based on that. And yes, we've had issues in the past where the mentor and the resident educator had a personality conflict and they don't quite get along. So we'd have to switch those up, after year 1 or 2. But we've had that issue before, but we always seem to get them to the right person. Core is where we register. I register everybody. That's also at the end of the year. I go in and mark them as complete if they complete all their assignments. And I do the orientation for the resident educators, the mentors for the district. And then I try to keep communication between the resident educators, the mentors, and facilitators and principals. It is usually not my role to go to a principal because I am not an evaluator. Like I said, the mentor is not an evaluator, but sometimes there are issues that need to be brought to the attention, of an administrator. That's very, very few and far between, but those conversations sometimes do have to happen just in case there's a safety issue or whatever might arise like that. All right, so this is it. I did create a website for the resident educators to go to. So this is local. And if I scroll down, it's backwards. Here's the matrix that the state released from going from last year's program to the new program. If you can read that and figure that out, you're better than I am. But those are the updates in a very chaotic form. Year 1, the teachers they'll come to the site, they go to year 1. This takes them right through their mentoring year, explains everything. There are our year 1 mentors. What they do is they click on their name, that opens a Google Drive folder, and they can dump their videos and all their paperwork right into that folder, right from the website. The RESA obviously is more rigorous and a lot more information. It gives them the deadlines for when everything is due right there. February 3rd, 2023 is when the lesson reflection, their videos due. Score reports come out April 4th, and they have until June 15th to download the score reports, which gives them that feedback if they didn't pass, or even if they did, they see how they were graded on that and how they're scored. There's a very good website. The RESA website is very well done. It is separate from the ODE website. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to navigate the ODE website. Yes. Sometimes it's very challenging, but I will say that whoever made the RESA website did a very good job. All of the information is easy to find for everyone. I put links in here just for our student or for our resident educators' sake. And then like the leadership year is in here. And this action plan down here is a simple form that they go through, they fill out. They have to have a colleague sign that they did the leadership activity. And they also need to get that approved by me to make sure. The one thing that we have to delineate is the difference between coaching and teaching. A lot of our people want, or the co-curricular, extracurricular activities. I did a awards banquet for football. That's great, but this is instructional based. This is educational based. So you have to do something based on the education, like a math night. They put on some kind of, academic oriented school activity. So that's all there. They go there, they can find all their information and in one place. And as always, I answer a lot of emails when they have questions. So that's it. Sorry that took so long.
No, that was very informative.
Thank you. Any questions?
And that's why I have Mr. Parker here.
Come on, Sue.
Any questions? Yeah. All right.
To beleaguer the point, but this is all after a 4-year degree, and a credentialed college program has put that stamp on this person that they're ready to teach. I mean, so we talk about layers and levels, and I mean, when I graduated, the state said, "Okay, you're good enough. I could teach." So it's just everything's more complicated.
Ironically, too, if they go to I believe it's a state school, they have to do something almost identical to this to graduate with the education degree. So they do it in college, and then at their senior year, and then when they get the job, they have to do it again. So it's actually,
Yeah.
Hopefully that prepares them for the
But
one.
ideally,
that, you know.
or turns them away.
I got to ask my daughter because this is her senior year. I got to ask her.
Did you do that?
It's Heidelberg. So
Heidelberg.
but still.
the only good part of it that I see that based on everything is it's very focused on performance based things. It's not assessment test based, because there are good teachers that are not good test takers.
Sure.
Right here. But you can still teach and not be a good test taker. And before, in the older days, you took a test, and if you didn't pass it, you weren't teaching. At least here you can prove in front of students that you can do it. And that's an asset to have.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, children are more complicated.
Bingo.
These
Everything.
days. So, this
You need
could
more
really-
skills.
Yeah, this could really be an asset for a lot of new teachers. Like we said, you're in the classroom, college, and you think you're going to graduate, and you're like, I'm ready for it. And like you said, day 2, you're like, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Just kidding. So I think this is a good support for new teachers in the district.
It would
Brent,
be
thank you.
fun to see some of those slam dunk videos. I mean, wouldn't it? It would be kind of fun
Oh.
to see some of those that were just
Yeah.
really outstanding.
And there's various rules about the videos. Like I said, I'm not allowed to watch them. Once they're submitted, they're the property of the state.
Sure.
So they can use those for training purposes as exemplar materials and whatnot. So, so unfortunately, we don't get those back to show. I don't think that's permitted within the program. So it would be nice, though, to show one video that was exemplar and then one that wasn't, and show the difference in how, and have them take notes and say, have a discussion on why.
But the state can use that for training and so on.
For the assessors, yes.
Oh, okay. I was going to
Yeah.
say, well, maybe sometime we'll see some of our outstanding teachers and training materials. But
Nope. It's housed down there in Columbus.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks for staying so late.
Should brought
Long
Phil.
day.
Listen to that. That was
At least entertaining. All
You want
right.
to save for the 5-year forecast? Come on.
That's when the fun starts, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's just we're just warming up. All right, Mr. Price, I'm gonna go on. I think if that's okay.
Please.
First section, facilities operations. We have quite a lengthy list of donations, partly because we just haven't met now for a few weeks, so we missed a cycle. So you can kind of see the proportionality there. So if we could have a motion to accept those.
Can I get a motion to approve item 1, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Laird. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Spiritu. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiritu,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom. Yes. Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved.
Thank you very much. For tonight, items 2 through 5 are the second readings of the policies that we presented at our last meeting. So, a motion for those, please.
Can I get a motion to approve items 2 through 5, please?
So moved.
By Ms. Laird. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bloom. Any discussion?
I just had a couple of
Yes, ma'am.
things just for clarity's sake.
Sure.
So on page 1 of the emergency management safety plan, in the first paragraph,
Ms. Lewis, just so I know where you're on EBC 1 of 3. Is that right? I'm back in my documents. Yes. Okay. I think I get the
Yes.
same page. I want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing.
yes.
Yep.
So the new language that starts with active terrorism,
Infectious
correct.
disease. Yep.
So that line that starts with administrator, so it says administrator knew or should have reasonably known. That just sounds a little clunky. I don't know what a better way to say what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay, I see now. Okay.
So instead of that, I mean, or has knowledge of, or is made acutely aware of.
We can certainly, the board would like to chew on that. I'd be open to that. Only thing I would say is it probably has passed at least some legal muster, because this
Okay.
is one of them that came through our school board association recommendation. So that's
Okay.
the only thing I would caution just a little bit is I know this has probably been vetted by their legal department. So I tell you what,
Then
if you'd like.
who am I?
Well, no, not at all.
Yes.
This is your role. I mean, if there's ever been a role, it's this.
Yeah.
So I encourage you, Ms. Lewis, to take that on, and maybe we could table that. I could get some feedback maybe from our attorney. What does this actually mean? Because I have to admit, my blood runs a little cold when it says administrator should have known something.
Well, I guess
Right.
that's what I thought too. Like, I'm like, okay, then
Right.
move. Like, we gotta move then.
I'll do the board's bidding here. Would you like to pull that?
I'll make a motion to table the approval of that particular policy. So we'd have to do
EBC.
different roll calls.
Okay. So
Oh, I see.
first question before we make a motion. Is there any other, because it's under the same
Mm-hmm.
motion here, is there any other questions on any of the other policies?
Okay, before we pull them apart, sure.
Yes.
Okay. No, because what we can do is if we need to table all of those, since they're under the same motion, we can table instead of motioning for each one individually. So go
Just
ahead with your
kidding.
question.
No, it's just for this one.
Okay.
The
The
only
emergency-
comments, yeah.
The emergency management and safety
Yes,
plan.
that's the only one I had any.
Okay. And just so I understand, well, let's vote, and then I'll just clarify what we're
Did you have
asking.
more issues on that particular policy, though? More questions that you'd like researched?
Yes, but would it be appropriate then to just table all of that for right now, or throw it out there and
I think it would be good to have on record what the question being
Concern
brought
is?
forward
Okay.
is.
Okay, yeah.
so in that second paragraph that starts with the superintendent,
Yep.
it says with the involvement of the applicable stakeholders,
Mhm.
stakeholders being
Some definition for
On-
stakeholders?
yeah. And it looks like in the following sentences it does clarify
List
or it
out
does
some of
list
them.
out some
Yeah,
of
public
them.
health officials, yeah.
But I think it would be appropriate to list out right
Clarify
there, who we're talking about.
Okay.
And then now this is just a question. The following paragraph, who is the regional mobile training officer?
That's a great question.
I didn't know if that was like a general.
Well, we have a lot of,
Isn't that assigned from the state?
yeah, we have a lot
Yeah.
of state things, and I assume there's somebody that's checking us off as we submit all of our plans. That's my hunch.
So
But I don't
that was
say
my question. Is that a general state term, or is
I
that
believe
like
it is.
a person I can go and point to? Like, you are the,
But I would feel comfortable checking out to make sure that I know that actually is either an office holder or a official title of somebody. But we submit plans by building and by district. Each one of those then has to go through same process that we send it down, it gets all checked off, and then I get email saying, okay, this building is checked, this building is checked, this building is checked. It's my assumption that person is probably the regional mobile training officer, but I don't know that for sure.
okay. Last thing, and it's actually the first part of that same sentence. The sentence reads, upon request, the plan is also provided to the regional mobile training officer and the fire department emergency medical services.
Right.
Should that be a request that is made, or should that
Just do it.
information just be provided?
Should that just be like a mandatory part of what we do?
That we disseminate whatever the emergency plan is to all of the
Yep.
identified
Yep.
stakeholders. That way, in a time of a situationship, I
Everybody's
guess
on the same page.
everybody already knows what the what the plan is.
That's worth clarifying. Absolutely.
So,
Okay, so we will make a separate motion. Chantel, you're going to motion to table item number 2, correct? So we have a motion to table item number 2, just to have some of those questions
Absolutely.
addressed. Can I get a second? I'll second it. I'll second that motion. So any discussion on tabling item number 2? Okay. Roll call, please.
Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiritu,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
yes.
Okay.
And if I may, just since we're still talking about that one, the first one you brought up, Ms. Lewis, about the administrator knew or should have reasonably known, maybe just get a better idea of what exactly does that mean? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, or even just to clarify it, that has knowledge of, or
Yeah. What's that look like?
yeah, what does that
Right.
look like?
I get it. Okay.
This is where your professional area of expertise really helps us out.
Absolutely.
That policy is your
Right.
bailiwick, and we appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we need to, because we pulled that, do we need to change?
Now, I think if you just present it as items 3, 4, and 5, we should be okay.
Okay, and keep the same
Yeah.
first and
I
second?
would think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
All right, so any more discussion on, so item 2 has been tabled, so now this motion is just to approve items 3, 4, and 5. Is there any more discussion on those 3 in this motion? Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiritu, Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved.
All right. Thank you very much.
Just incidentally, I think the rules are if you table something, it must be brought to the
Has
next
to.
meeting.
Exactly right. Yep. So it stays live, doesn't die. That's
Yep.
right. Yep. So we'll have that, have those answers.
Thank you.
You bet. Item 6, a couple resignations, Donald Pratt and Ashley White. Item 7, couple appointments. The first 2 there are certified staff substitutes, which we always need. Phyllis Farbach and Sarah Rose are going to help us. Item B are some appointments. We have a student purposes that we see the food service family liaison there. That's the position that we've talked about that will work with families to try to manage our debt payment and lunch charges and resources and all that. So we're very excited about that.
I'm glad that came to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. We are too. Item 10, some more lifeguards for our special events. You see one student in the middle there, Evan Beardmore. Item 11, special event workers. Those are just as we need them for fall athletic events, tournaments. And item 12 are 2 status changes, one for Jacqueline Tomlinson and one for Allison Brownson. Those are our personnel motions for or items for this evening.
Can I get a motion to approve items 6 through 12, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Laird. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Lewis. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiritu,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved.
Thank you very much. Moving on to curriculum. We have just one item, and that is our English language learning professional development participants. Those 6 people went through a program to help improve literacy instruction, right, Denise? Thank you. And if I understand this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that $400 will be reimbursed back to the general fund from the university?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So those look for your approval this evening.
Can I get a motion to approve item 13, please?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Bloom. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Espiritu. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiritu, Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved. All right. Megan, you're up.
How do I feel? I apologize if I start sneezing or coughing. My allergies have decided to rear their ugly head, so I'm going to try to make sure I'm not too nasally. So tonight I have a couple items. We have our October financials, which I'm not going to dig too deep into them. You guys all have them in front of you, and I feel like the 5-year forecast kind of goes over this stuff as well. Item 15, we had an increase in expenses out of our mental health recovery fund. So I have an additional appropriation on there. And then item 16 is our 5-year forecast, which I will go over and just go over some of the highlights with you. You will see sitting at your desk, you're going to have 2 of these lovely financial or 5-year forecasts. I just want to let you know, page 1 is what we're assuming, which is that our lovely levy is going to pass. So you'll see the 3rd line down in our revenue. There's money coming in every year of the forecast. The not so pretty 5-year forecast on page 2 is what the state requires us to do, which is what does the picture look like if your levy does not pass? As you can see at the very bottom of that page, it's very ugly. And actually by fiscal year 24-25, if our spending doesn't change and we didn't make any sort of reductions, we would be out of money very quickly, very fast. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that income tax levy gives us probably about 20%, 25% of our funding, and it is not just that we would be trimming off the fat. We would be amputating a limb, and I don't know. It would be an interesting sight. So I just want to make sure to highlight that you notice there's 2 of them. That's why. But we're going to look at the more pretty version that's not as sad and depressing. You can study those other lovely ones at night if you need a nightmare. I also, because it was brought up tonight, those in local tax revenues are those very first 3 lines at the top. Real estate taxes, tangible personal property, income tax. And you'll see that makes up about 2/3 of our funding. The state makes up about 1/3. So just wanted, since that was a topic tonight, I thought I would draw your attention to it. You will see that this forecast is actually looking better than years in the past. And it's very, very, very happy. That is very much so. Thankful to the directors that have taken me at my word when I said, please make sure we're spending what we need to. Like, we have to cut the expenses as much as possible. The next couple, this year, you're going to see expenses probably go up. We projected that into the forecast, but we don't know what inflation's going to do. We don't know what gas prices are going to do. All of those wonderful things that affect all of us at home and here are going to, food prices, any of that, are going to make this forecast just a joy. In the revenue side, state funding, there again, that's an unknown. We're in the second year, so they're deciding how they're going to fund schools. Do they want to stick with the fair funding formula? Do they not? So just another little unknown that makes our life fun. Also, medical insurance, that is also on the rise. So in our salaries and benefits, which you'll see makes up our largest portion of our expenses, that will also increase. An interesting thing to look at. So one of the slides, I don't have them numbered in here. Salary and benefits makes up currently about 77% of our expenses. And please also note that for fiscal 21 and 22 and part of 23, we've written off some salary and benefits to ESSER. So you'll see in a larger increase in salary and benefits in fiscal 24-25. That is due to those charge-offs to ESSER not being available in those forecasted years. The goal is to be at 80%, and when we've looked at other entities' benefits, salary and benefits ratio to their expenses, percentage of their revenue, as soon as you hit over that 80%, you're going to start seeing deficit spending, and that's exactly what's happening with us. In fiscal year, I believe it's 22, 23, 24. In fiscal year 25, we hit 81%, and you're going to see that in that year we have just under $200,000 of deficit spending, and that each year it increases, that deficit spending gets higher and higher. We do end the year with 8.1, or we do end the forecast with $8.1 million, which is very happy. But I just wanted to point out that it's as soon as that's something we're going to have to watch and try to get back down so that we're not at that high of a deficit spending. So, I think that's kind of a lot of the stuff I wanted to highlight. Is there any questions?
First, I just want to say these extra presentations you put together are great. I think this is very good work, Megan. Really appreciate that. And I also appreciate what you're saying. Those are standard models, and once you hit a certain percentage in salary and wage administration, you know, you're at some risks there. And some things I just want to make sure that people know go into that. There are some student teacher ratio requirements. There are supplemental service requirements. Your social workers and so on. A lot of that, to have them and how many is mandated. So just kind of keep that in mind. And of all the things that we can provide students, the most important is a teacher. So I would hope that would be our number one expense.
Yes.
Megan did a little calculation after we learned that our levy didn't pass. That deficit would represent about 130 employees. Now that's both classified and certified, so it's teachers and support staff. But that's a lot. That's like every fourth person. If the only thing we cut was personnel, right? So that's just a number for comparison. It gives you an idea of just how much of that is our budget. Tremendous. And you're right, Ms. Laird. I can't imagine trying to legally operate this district with the mandates that we have for ratios and coverage and safety of children and all those other things with that kind of, it'd be very difficult to do.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve items 14 through 16, please?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Bloom. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Laird. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiritu,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved.
Okay. Next item on the agenda for tonight is the considering the approval for the resolution for the renewal of the income tax levy. This is our standard procedure. I bring it to the board, and then assuming this passes, there's another resolution that would have to be passed. So this is step one for getting this on the May ballot.
Can I get a motion to approve item 17, please? Motion by Mrs. Spiritu. And a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Laird. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have a quick question. One of the things that was different this renewal, it was the opinion of legal experts on the level of involvement
Yeah.
of board members, employees, and so on. And I remember you and I beat the streets, previously. I remember one particular meeting, we didn't leave till 10 o'clock at night, to try to be that liaison that traditionally a board member has been from a school district to the general public to educate the public on the needs, and then vice versa, letting a school know what the public needs. The most recent opinion we got on that, I felt is a little restrictive from that part of the role. Might it be prudent to ask for a second opinion?
Yeah, I think so.
Was that opinion maybe an abundance of caution? Too restrictive?
This kind of fits. So at Capitol Conference, Megan and I both attended a session, and it was put on by a company that helps. It's
a company that helps schools pass
Third party
levies.
electoral
Right.
levy.
And they've been involved with schools, and that's what they do is they help pass levies. And actually, they touched on that. As board members, we are easier because we don't punch a time clock to when our normal working time is. And for administrators and staff, as long as it's outside of the normal school day, there isn't really anything, so for John, if his normal school day, if school is out by 4, if we're saying teachers can leave by 4:00 at an elementary school, that's basically the end of the day. So anything after that, somebody can challenge that if they want to, but it really isn't going to fit into that challenge. It's really just, it can't be during the day. I think the biggest thing was, like, for us that were on the committee, is trying to pass signs out to staff, but it couldn't be during the school day. It's just logistics part of it. It doesn't make any sense. We're trying to pass a levy for a school, but we can't take it in and put it in their hand. They had to walk out with it as they were leaving school after school hours, and stuff like, you can't say anything over the announcements about it, or just something simple like that. It's pretty ridiculous, but there are, for board members, it's the easiest. For staff members, there's really no restrictions other than it can't be during that school day, Monday through Friday.
Or maybe it would be reasonable to say, because this is typically our paid time,
Right.
that a board member wouldn't get up and do a pro levy presentation during a
Right.
public board meeting.
Correct.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
To go and talk to community organizations, anything like that, as board members, if it's during the week and during a school day, we are fully capable of doing that. So like when we would go and talk to Kiwanis or whatever, we can still do that. It would be the administrators and staff that wouldn't be able to if it's during the week, during the school day.
so that's a campaign organization. Did they have a legal department that vetted that? I
can
guess what
certainly check, but-
what I'm asking for is this, a second opinion, a comparative credentialed lawyer's interpretation, because it's a very different interpretation to what our contracted legal counsel gave us. So I would feel better if we got a second opinion from a licensed attorney. And maybe even if we have someone, local here, I don't think we need to go look for a large firm.
I will find something.
But that's only my suggestion. It's a board decision.
No, I think,
I would agree.
I'd be
Yeah,
more comfortable with it myself.
Yeah,
because
any
I
information
feel like I
we
don't
can
really
get.
know where their lines are as well.
Right.
For myself.
Just some suggestions. I don't know if we have to do a bid process for
Right.
it, exactly what that is. I do know Joel Brechta has helped the school in many different areas. Employment law,
Sure.
including public employees, is something that he does specialize in. So we've got some
Some coverage. yeah.
contacts. So, but I'll let you research how we go about
I'll do
finding
some digging.
somebody.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Spiritu, Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes. Motion's approved. All right. Board member communications. Lori.
It was a long night. Didn't think that was going to come. Well, I'd like to thank Mr. McIntosh for his presentation and his side of the coin on the whole thing.
Sure.
And all the donations. Nice to see people willing to give, especially for the play and
Yeah.
all that they can eat. And Megan for her presentation. That's about all I have.
Anybody else?
So yeah, there was a lot to take in today, very informative. So I'd also like to thank Mr. McIntosh for coming in and discussing the other side and seeing both sides so we can decide. I mean, it was very informative. Also like to thank Mr. Parker too. That was a great presentation and just I mean, the teachers do a lot. I mean, they hold a lot on their plate, and sounds like a lot of pressure. I mean, to stay on top of everything and I mean, not having another chance after you fail. I mean, like, what do you do? Go back to school? I mean, I don't know. That's, I mean, a lot. I mean, that's just to know all the pressure that they have. Thank the community too for the donations. It's always great to see all the support that we have. And I think that's it.
Chantel?
I would like to thank everybody for the donations. Where would we be without the generosity of our community? And echo what they've said, and gratitude to our teachers and everyone that's employed in a public school district. It's under scrutiny all the time. And unfortunately, it seems that we're answering and firing. I don't want to say fire, but we're providing information back to accusations and negativity that not enough time gets to get spent on highlighting the very beautiful things that happen here all day, every day. So while the business at hand requires us to address those things, I'm looking forward to some more presentations that you had for us before that really highlight kids and some great things that teachers have been doing and really show our families, you know, what's really happening inside this public school.
Yes.
Not necessarily every public school that you hear about, but ours has got a lot of really good stuff going on.
Sure.
And of course, I want to thank our presenters. It's tough to get up and do a presentation and answer those kinds of questions. And it really was credible information for that perspective that by him coming helped us to provide for ourselves and for our families so they can participate. I'd like to thank the person that came, that spoke her piece about it. You can't govern with the will of the people if you don't know what the will of the people is. So we really appreciate people participating. Thank you.
Sarah?
Had the opportunity to attend my first OSBA conference. That was amazing. In a little overwhelming kind of way. It's a lot larger than I thought it was, but for the, you know, being the new kid on the block, lots of great information, even just to, you know, have time to, you know, discuss, you know, things that are not in my daily bailiwick, so to speak. But there are also a lot of economies of scale to what I do in my day job versus the things that were offered for discussion at that conference. As Mr. Detweiler said, the musical was amazing. Shout out to Mr. Havas and Miss Zucker. I went all 3 nights. The first night I thought was well attended, or the first showing I thought was well attended. The second showing I thought, oh yeah, this one was it. Then that Sunday show came around and I was like, holy moly. I mean, it was a packed house. So it's really nice to see the community show up for our kids and not always a sporting event for other things that, you know, our kids do. But speaking of sporting events, winter sports are in full swing, but there's also a lot of other activities. So if you have an opportunity as a community member to just jump on the district website, you can see there's band concerts over the next couple of weeks. There's all kinds of, you know, sports and things to watch our children be engaged in. So that, and thank you just to all the teachers and administrators for the job, and personnel period for the job that's done in here every day. Every board meeting I learned just a little more about how much scrutiny, I think is a very appropriate word, our educators and administrators and school buildings are under and required to. So I think it is appropriate to definitely thank all of our personnel at every chance that we have. Amen.
All right. Yeah, thanks to Mr. McIntosh for coming in, providing information. You can't make a decision without all the information, at least not a well-informed decision. My biggest takeaway from that is still, let's make it fair. If we make it fair, I'm all on board with whatever we want to do, but let's make it fair. I don't like people having to play by different rules. That to me just doesn't fit. So thank you, Sue and Brent, for coming in, presenting all that stuff. You've got your hands full in HR. Good luck with that. The musical was great. My family and I, we all went on Saturday afternoon. Great job to all the kids that were involved. They did great job. I had a particular problem with one cast member. He seemed to be a little bit more mature than the other participants. I don't know. His dancing skills were a little shaky. I don't know. Mrs. Detweiler, you need to get him out on that dance floor a little more often. Get him into practice a little bit. But no, everybody enjoyed it. So great job, everybody. So with that, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we do need to go into a very brief executive session. It'll be under item N as in Nancy. We're not taking any more board action after this. We'll adjourn as soon as we're out of executive session, so there will be no more board business after that. So I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session under item N. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Laird. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Ms. Laird,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom, Mrs. Spear
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Okay. We are in executive session.